Gauteng Education Department will reopen its online application process for school admissions from today until the 30th of next month. It says over 19,000 pupils haven't yet been placed at schools due to incomplete applications. MEC Matome Chiloane briefed the media about this process just a short while ago. It might have been yesterday. He says over 325,000 pupils had successfully been placed at schools for the 2025 academic year. For more on this, let's bring in the department spokesperson, Steve Mabona, with us here in studio. Great to see you, sir. Thanks very much indeed for popping by. One of the things the MEC mentioned in his update is that I think it was grade 1 pupils, all of them have been placed with successful applications. You'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. If so, that's quite the feat.
Yes, good morning and to all our viewers. Like Ezi has already indicated that this is a different year for us. We have never found ourselves in a situation where we have placed everyone. So we've placed all the grade 1s, and the grade 8 we're remaining with about 124.
Right.
Which on Monday we had a meeting with the parents. We gave them options and we have already placed them. Those that don't want the spaces that we've offered, then they will have an opportunity to object, so that we can see on how we're going to be, working with them. But we have placed everyone as we speak now. We are opening the system for late registration, those that did not apply at all, and the 19,000 that you mentioned, they need to go into the system and choose schools there.
And I suppose they're going to have to make do with what's already left. But before we get to that, I'm interested to find out what led to the success this time around, because there's been a number of iterations of this online process, and you'll admit it wasn't always smooth. What made the difference this time?
The difference is that we are opening satellite schools, which are assisting us in the high pressure areas. You will remember that last year we were sitting with just over 500 in around Kempton Park, unplaced, and we were sitting with over 200 in the Tshwane West, and we had around Roodepoort, we had a number there. So we were struggling, but we are introducing satellite schools where we are then accommodating, like in the Teresa Park as well. So that's why we did not have much of those that we could not place, because the satellite schools are assisting us. But over and above that, we were building classrooms in some of the brick and mortar schools and augmenting with the mobiles as well. So that's what we've been doing. And again, next year, we are launching probably about 11 schools. And we are in a process to finalize about 8, where we have a partnership with private sector to build those schools. So we are building, but our challenge is in the areas where there's a development, like your Midrand, Centurion, Kempton Park area. There's flats that are being built that compound to our problem, because we're in Kokmaya, we are not in a position to accommodate everyone that will want to be accommodated. In a school that accommodate over probably 1,001 or 1,002, you receive many applications. So that's the challenge for us.
Yeah, and just about that, you'd imagine that if there's going to be any kind of construction in an area, there needs to be feasibility studies, consultations with yourselves as a department to see if you can actually take on whatever may come from that in the form of demand. Is that happening just out of interest? Is anybody speaking to the department when there's going to be a block of apartments, for example, built in a particular area?
They're not doing it. And that's why we've been calling upon municipalities to work very closely with us, make sure that we are accommodated. If the private sector is in a position to say, out of what we'll be building, we can accommodate a school, we can have a partnership with them to say, build a school, so that we can then accommodate children that will be in that area. But they're just building development without considering schools. So that's a challenge that we are facing. But we've been calling upon municipality, during the approval processes. That's why they need to raise it to say, but is there a school that will be built in and around your development, because then you are compounding a challenge for the Department of Education.
Fair enough. The late applications is why we actually asked you to come in today. I always find this is a good opportunity to help people who may have made genuine mistakes in their applications. So in instances where, for example, an application is incomplete or was rejected for whatever reason, what are some of the most common mistakes you're finding people are making during that process?
The incomplete application, it will be, a parent will just create a profile and they would not apply to a school. Some will create a profile and create a learner profile, but do not choose a school. Some will not upload documents, nor even submit those documents in the school. So those are the challenges that we're facing. That's why we're saying they need to go back into the system, because if you have not chosen a school, it means you have not applied. So you are given that opportunity to go and check, a school that is available. Unfortunately, during late registration, we can only avail schools with space or with capacity. Those that are full, we are not putting them in the system.
All right, so the option won't be there to begin with in any case. In the past, there'd also be issues around how clear the documents themselves are, especially in the beginning stages, where people, I think, would just take pictures of their documents. Are you finding there's an improvement insofar as that is concerned?
No, definitely, because what we are doing, we encourage those that cannot upload to submit at schools. And at schools, they will then verify. But what we found being a challenge was the proof of address. Because you will understand that we prioritize, those that stay closer to a school. So all parents, they will want to be very close to a school. Some, they don't even stay in the area, but they have an address. So during the verification process, we found that there were parents that gave us fraudulent proof of address. And we interacted with them to say, but this is not your address, because many schools were verifying. They are verifying because they are looking at the number of those that would have applied to a school to say, but if you can accommodate about 300 or 400, then that exercise is quite easy for them. Where they suspect that there's something in terms of the proof of address, then they go and verify. They visit the address and ask, is this person staying here? And in some instances, they found that there was no one with that name. So the schools, because they were so pressured, they had to do that exercise, and they verified, and we found that some of the parents, they borrowed, or I don't know how to put it, addresses.
Yeah, we could find other words. I do sometimes, Steve, wonder, well, let me ask the question this way. The whole idea around the online process was to try and make sure, for example, there aren't schools reserved for certain people. At least that's one of the objectives, to ensure that we are as inclusive as we are, because in the past, we know that some schools would look at, for example, your surname to see whether or not you should be there. Now that some years have passed, are we able to measure the success of that? Are we at a point where we can say, look, of course, there's a whole lot more that could be done, but the schools are actually becoming more inclusive, and we are breaking down those enclaves, as it were, where it seems certain institutions were reserved for certain people?
The online admissions assisted us dearly, because remember, before we introduced regulations which are aligned to the process, it was only your 5-kilometer radius. If you were beyond 5-kilometer radius of a school, you could not access the school. So the categories that we have, if you are closer to a school, or there's a sibling in a school, or the child is in a previous school, like your primary, closer to the high school, you can access that. You are within 30-kilometer radius, if there's still capacity, can be accommodated. Beyond 30-kilometer radius, you can still be accommodated, which was not the case before. So when we check the schools and the capacity, they managed to accommodate quite a sizable number of those that would have been, disadvantaged, previously. But that the PELA Act will be assisting us to be in a position to assist the school to administer admissions, and also to assist them with the decision on a language policy. and making sure that schools are accessible to the entirety. That's why there are some who don't want the implementation of the Act because they want exclusivity. And that's what we've been saying. I mean, you'll remember we lost a case in 2018 where a school took us to court because they didn't want us to interfere with their admissions because they claimed that they were full. But when we took the officials to the school, we found that classrooms were converted to something else. I mean, about 3 classes were converted. So it tells you that they were not full. They didn't have desirable numbers to say they are full. They had an obligation to say, now that we are not full and the space, let's introduce an English class that will move parallel with those that are learning in Afrikaans without doing away with Afrikaans. Because there's this misconception that we want to target Afrikaans, want to do away with it. And people, you know, hide behind the finger and say they want to, their culture will be affected. What culture? I mean, if these children are growing together, they play together, what's wrong in them being in a school that will be accessed by everyone?
Yeah, and of course the contentions around those 2 clauses is still very much
no, the 13th is today.
To beat.
The 13th is today. President must sign and this thing must be implemented. We are ready to move.
I thought it ends on Friday.
The 13th. Where is the 13th?
The
on
13th,
Friday?
yeah. Today's the 11th.
So it's 2 days to go.
You're very keen. But anyway, I hear that, and we're all waiting with bated breath, by the way, to see how things are going to progress, especially given what's already being said in the public domain. But Steve Mabona, and I have to thank you. Appreciate your popping by. Maybe we'll talk after the 13th, and you'll tell me your reaction to whatever the president decides after that, and we'll see how it goes. Steve Mabona is the spokesperson for the Gauteng Education Department, speaking in the main about, of course, that online application process which opens from today for late applications for grades 1 and 8. And who knows, maybe you'll speak to us about the Bella Bill or the Bella Act after Friday's deadline.